Visionary. By Douglas Milewski. Elemental P. United States. Copyright 2016 by Douglas Milewski. All rights reserved. Chapter 12. Working with Comrade Fate meant living with Comrade Fate. She brought in breakfast to the Connolly Square flat most days, excepting the weekends, reading her way through the backlog of letters. Apparently, atheists believe in neither Saturday nor Sunday. For lunch, I had a nearly endless series of invitations to wherever was fashionable. Afterwards, I slowly sobered and typed all afternoon. At night, I walked home, ate dinner with everyone in 101, then climbed up those 10 stories to hit my bed. In the morning, I rolled out to do it again. I found this girl a new school, Fate said. They have an opening. It's not the best school, but it's better than her current one. I found this boy's father a job. He's been on the waiting list for a year. He's now going to load trucks. This other family had been waiting for housing for a year. I found them a flat on Hanover Street. Fate would go on like that all morning. I may have found her tiring, but I did respect her results. When she said that she could make things happen, she wasn't kidding. The woman knew every twist and turn in the entire system, often bypassing Gordian knots rather than getting bogged down and slicing through them. She was party and she could pull rank. I still had my doubts about this whole venture. Many people didn't trust the party, sure that any attention from the government would be their last. I dare say for most of those unfortunate people, this was the first time that the government had ever worked for them rather than against them. With Fate, I somehow found myself doing good work. I found myself making the lives of others better, which was not something that I ever imagined myself doing. I was the brilliant kid who went to college early, not somebody who helped the world. Wizards don't help the world. I only learned to help myself. In selfishness, my teachers were excellent role models, and my sister was the master. After my grandmother died in 1911, my sister Alexandria came up to Ivy Hall to supervise me. She arrived with 2 suitcases, a fashionable haircut, and an agenda that did not include me. Almost immediately, my rooms were occupied by classmates that I did not know, all of whom were only there for Alex. Be it morning or evening, I never had a moment's quiet. On some nights, Alex locked the doors and refused to let me in, too busy with whatever boy she was with. I wrote home complaining, but my sister presumably pinched my letters out of the mailbox. It continued this way for an entire year. Winter, spring, summer, autumn again, each season providing me new Alexandria challenges. Everything came to a head over Christmas when Alex sent me home ahead of herself. When she finally did arrive triumphantly, she waved about the ring of some graduate student. They were engaged and my parents were livid. That marriage lasted 3 months before they separated. She left the fool for a history scholar. After moving with him to Britain, she left him and went to London. I presume that she became someone's mistress. A few years beyond that, she turned up in Paris living with a Negro jazz musician. Rumor had it that the trumpet player had shot a man in the States and could not return home. In some ways, I envied her. She feared nothing. She could live the soiree life as if she were born to it. I could give you a list of her lovers, and you'd be amazed at all the famous men she'd slept with. They weren't famous back then, but something in her eye could pick out the truly gifted. Eventually, she married a count and took up having more discreet affairs until she overdosed on sleeping pills and gin. Cymbeline interrupted my thoughts, realizing that I was not listening. "No one else thinks like you, darling," she said, staring me in the eye. "That's why they love your writing." That comment stuck with me. It burned inside my belly for a few days, and no amount of hors d'oeuvres and caviar and pâté and fine cheese could put out that fire. I even tried drinking, but that only made the fire worse. This whole socializing life was lost on me. It was a facade. I no more belonged to it than a seal belonged in the treasury. The lifestyle tried to distract me, but my mind was elsewhere. My mind was on Fiat Lux. I was sure that there was more to Fiat Lux than I had first suspected. They had been around for years, so why had they changed tactics now? What had changed? The teleportation attacks by Fiat Lux did not come until after I had published my first story. Was I the inadvertent inventor of such a strategy? Did I suggest the use of teleportation as a weapon? Were all those deaths ultimately attributable to me? After I had published a story giving a criminal a fanciful name, Fiat Lux responded with a fanciful name. How many more names would I see? Or was that just coincidence? At this point in time, I could not afford coincidence. Even with Comrade Fate and the Baroness backing me up, coincidence would get me executed. To learn whether I was an untapped mastermind behind Fiat Lux's plots, I had to invent something that was harmless and unexploitable, yet showed my hand. I would have no more deaths. How was I to do that? I had no idea, so whatever it was going to be, it had to be truly new. According to my earlier work, a special kind of teleportation, a serial teleportation, could be created, but only if the things traveling through it had zero mass. Light, being massless, would be able to travel through such an arrangement. Furthermore, if the whole arrangement could be shaken, then the teleportation area could act as a loudspeaker by distorting the air around it. The arrival point didn't need to transfer any mass, all it needed was to vibrate. Hook that mess up to some lenses and a microphone, and you could project a giant booming picture onto a wall. Someone of minimal talent could go ahead and bring up a fog in the correct position, and so Fiat Lux could project a message in booming sound to the people of the city. I didn't even need any math for that. Any idiot with moderate ingenuity could jury-rig that setup, and there were no end of tinkers in the world. So I wrote a story with all those features, then told the Baroness to prioritize it. I needed to see the results as soon as possible. I then went back to socializing and attempting to stay engaged while the socialites made no attempt to stay sober. They lived as if they were on perpetual leave from the army. Back in basic training, I had tried the traditional soldier's leave. The whole 24-hour affair consisted of hurling yourself at the closest town, getting drunk, trying to get laid, and generally having a miserable time. As basic training guarantees itself the most miserable point of any man's existence, that 24 hours of time seemed like the time of your life. Even then, I hadn't enjoyed it. The lousy part about being drunk is not the drunk part, it's the done part. At some point while you are drunk, you've had enough of being drunk and you don't want to stop being drunk, but you can't stop. The drunk just keeps going on whether you like it or not. Once fun, the experience has now become a type of self-inflicted torture that refuses to end even as your friends push you to drink more. Our first time out ended as many first times out. My mates got so rowdy that the MPs hauled us back to the drunk tank. They let us out when our leave was over. The next time that we got leave, my mates went out and they did it again. I ditched them, and I wound up in a Baptist church with a preacher who tried to turn me Christian because Catholics weren't Christian enough in his book. Other than that, the preacher and I had a great time. He and his wife had a habit of adopting any stray in town who wasn't a rowdy drunk. The Baptists called it their mission. They even put me up on the sofa. So after a good breakfast, a fiery sermon in church, and a home-packed lunch, the preacher drove me back to the front gate, shook my hand, gave me a Bible, and prayed for my soul to get saved. My only salvation from my current social set was my lunches on Thursdays with Cymbeline. We'd go to the local lunch counter and get sandwiches, along with a malted to share. After lunch, Cymbeline would gather up my bills and take them to the Baroness. "You're obsessed," she said, sitting on her stool. "About what?" "About Fiat Lux. You don't talk about anything else anymore. You used to talk about all your jobs, or the university, or any number of things. Now all I hear about are your Fiat Lux theories. You're like one of those old cranks." My anger flared at that. "You were there too." "Yes, I was, and I still cry about it. I still think about it. I can't unsee it, can I? You're inhuman. You've forgotten about the people. I don't think that you can even tell me how many people died. No, you can only think about the perpetrators. You can only think about how they did what they did, solving your equations. That's exactly why you wizards made yourself unpopular. Your magic forgets about people." Those were fighting words to me. "And your theosophy can do what? Sit there and cry?" "I'm sorry, I'm not one to sit there and cry. I'm the only damn person in this city who has a clue about this mess. I'm the only morally responsible one. How do you think that feels?" She pointed out the window, presumably towards downtown. "The government has the moral responsibility. The party and the church volunteered for the job. They're running around right now trying to figure this all out." That was nonsense, and I knew it. No, they're running around clueless. They're running around blaming all the wrong people. They're running around using Fiat Lux as an excuse to give themselves more power because the problem justifies more power. None of them, and by none I mean none of them, can actually do a thing. So that leaves me. "Remember who pays your bills?" she said, waving a sheaf. "The Baroness wants her stories. We need them now more than ever. The people need guidance. Fiat Lux's narrative is louder than ours. We have to meet it. We must speak more often with more grace and more persistence. Perhaps through recognizing their humanity, by recognizing the God-created light inside of them, we can peel the perpetrators from this path of darkness, eating away at the tail of the snake until there is nothing left but powerless fangs. I scoffed. She scoffed. We both scoffed. As if to prove my obsession correct, Fiat Lux attacked again that night. This time, I was not a witness to the events. By now I knew a few journalists who could give me unbiased descriptions. They survived on their meager state wages by writing stories on mimeographs, then selling the truth at greatly inflated prices. If they had been caught running those illegal presses, they would face stiff prison terms because the state was quite jealous of their information monopoly. Fortunately, even the cops liked to know the news. If the illegal papers were forcibly shut down, then they wouldn't know what was actually going on. According to my source, large fire clouds were appearing here and there, followed by shards of metal raining down. On looking over his notes, with the excuse that I could use this as story material, I deduced their attack. Fiat Lux was now tying lit flares to gasoline cans. The whole assembly disintegrated during transmission, arriving as a mist rather than as a solid object, mixing the fuel with the air. The burning phosphorus lit the fuel-air mixture, detonating it. Cheap. Easy. Brutal. This was just as I had predicted after the first attack. I thanked God that Fiat Lux didn't know about diesel fuel and fertilizer. During the war, the munitions guys used to blow that stuff off all the time just because the munition guys were crazy. As a rule, you should never let engineers play with explosives. That wasn't the interesting part. At the end of each attack, a giant face appeared on the burning cloud as if projected. Wearing a mask like some dime store villain, someone, presumably Divine Right, spoke in a low and booming voice. You see our might. Our righteous army grows by the day. Your roots are decayed. Your rulers are corrupt. The Lord of hosts stands against you. Money rules the party, not the people. Return to the Lord. When you do, we will pass over you as God passed over his chosen people. Mark your doors with the blood of the Lamb. We will deliver you to the promised land, a land of milk and honey, and the 12 tribes of Israel shall live free, for they live in the shadow of Yahweh. Repent. I speak as John did of old, as he waited for the Messiah to arrive, this time to create the shining city on the hill, to trample out the vineyards and bring the kingdom of God. Heed us, for we are Fiat Lux, the apostles of the apocalypse. God save the king. Yes, they were conflating metaphors without mercy. How's that for damned?